live stream.
So welcome everyone to our global webinar on youth perspectives on the climate crisis. Angela's going to play a little video for us now.
It is scary to be a youth in this time. It is scary to think that a lot of adults are not taking the climate crisis seriously. And I don't want to be scared. I don't want my kids to be scared.
I started climate striking in front of the White House. Every single Friday, I went out there, and when Biden was elected for office, I got a call from the White House, and now they wanted me to be a part of the administration to help usher America's transition to clean energy. And I'm the youngest White House advisor in U.S. history.
I first got involved at the age of 12 when I was first diagnosed with heart palpitations and irregular heartbeat due to the air pollution and smog pollution that ravaged Los Angeles. And for me, it was a moment of realization that a lot of my community members, including I, weren't able to breathe.
I got involved in the climate movement, I always say, through my parents, because they met in the first Earth Summit in 1992. So I kind of have climate activism in my veins, if you could say that. In 2015, my hometown was hit by heavy rainfall. I saw the biggest flood that we've ever had. I realized that we are more powerful than we think we are.
My message to the politicians would be to really take a look at the commitments that every country has made and act on them. Continue to raise the bar.
What I want to tell leaders is that we know that before arriving to COP26, you have already drafted what your increase in ambition will be. I want them to internalize the urgency that we are feeling as a younger generation. And I want them to increase their ambition.
Right now, we aren't seeing major action or really any key promises from world leaders. And you don't need to hear plans for what you think you might do, but actually give us plans about what you're actively doing, where you're actively funding, and what you're actually building. That is what we need. We don't need any more empty speeches, pretty words.
My administration is working overtime to show that our climate commitment is action, not words.
Climate anxiety is a tough thing to explain. For me, it's the uncertainty that there might not be a future for us.
By 2050, we will know whether we have succeeded or failed in addressing the climate crisis. And it is really scary to think about the fact that my kids are going to have an uncertain future.
We are growing up in a society where literally us turning 30 and 40 we'll have a planet that's drastically different from our parents. And I think that's what drives me, is that, and it kind of drives our entire generations, because we can't turn away from this. This is literally our future. We have so little time to take action, but the solutions are here.
So, as you can see, as highlighted in the video, youth voices are central to our climate challenges and re-electing Democrats as well. I'm Dana Freeling, the chair of Democrats Abroad Environment and Climate Crisis Council. I'm a Texas voter, and I'm calling in from my home in Finland. With me today are Miguel Madrigal Hidalgo, the chair of the Global Youth Caucus, an Ohio voter and calling in from Costa Rica, and Mohammed Ahmed, an active 19-year-old steering committee member of both the Global Youth Caucus and the ECCC, also an Ohio voter, calling in from Kenya. We are also thrilled to have with us some special guests today, all notable youth climate activists calling in from the US, which we will introduce shortly. We are now only 6 months out from the pivotal US 2024 elections, where not only is democracy and other vital freedoms on the ballot, but so too is the future of US climate policy and really the viability of planetary health. The Earth our youth will inherit. The last 12 months were the hottest in history, and planetary boundaries are being breached. We are finally taking action thanks to the Biden-Harris administration's historic legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, and other efforts. But the planet is changing too, perhaps more rapidly. This is an age of energy addition. New demand for energy is supplemented with clean energy, but emissions are still rising worldwide. It is a climate emergency. Leading the charge in confronting this emergency are those whose futures are most on the line, our youth. We are honored to engage in a discussion with some of those leading Democratic youth voices across America today to parse that road forward. I'm now proud to introduce our International Chair, Martha McDevitt-Pugh, to share a few words with us today. In addition to her marked impact on LGBTQ+ rights for overseas Americans, Martha is also a champion of the environment. She was an original signatory to the DNC's Environment and Climate Crisis Council as a DNC member, and was a vital force in helping us, Democrats abroad, establish its own council. Leading the Democrats abroad troops at this decisive juncture, I give you our stalwart leader, Martha. Martha?
Thank you so much, Dana. And it's really, really a privilege and an honor to be able to be here today with all of our speakers and with our audience, with all those who've joined today. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and look forward to hearing from all of you. I'm Martha McDevitt-Pugh. I am a California voter living in the Netherlands, below sea level, shall we say. And if you think about the climate, you can imagine what that means. And I'm very, very proud to be leading Democrats abroad in what is really a critical and even existential for our democracy election year. There's so much at stake in this election. We simply will not make the progress that we need to make as a country with the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, as president. It is absolutely essential that we do all we can. And there is so much we can do, and there is so much that we are doing in this important year to make sure that people get out to vote and that they tune into the issues and that we really start to have conversations with each other, one human being to another, and find the ways that we can unite and find all of the topics that we actually care about and which we can forward, which will be able to be realized under a Democratic administration. So I'm really glad that you're all here today to hear about this important topic of the climate. I'm also very grateful for all of you for being voters. If you haven't requested your ballot yet and you're an overseas American, please go to votefromabroad.org and make sure you tick that box. Make sure you send that form in, because it guarantees you your federal right to be able to vote. And should you know other Americans who are living abroad or planning to move abroad for this coming election, it is absolutely essential that folks go to votefromabroad.org and they take those couple of minutes to fill in that form, to inform their local election official at the place where they last lived that they will be voting from abroad in this election year, and to be sure that they get their email ballots sent to them. 45 days out, the 21st of September is the day that we're going to start voting abroad this year. That's one of the things that makes us so special, is that we vote early. That is why I'm so thrilled with all the early organizing that's going on in Democrats Abroad, including this webinar. But really critical that folks go and ask for their ballot and make sure that they are on the voting rolls, because that's what counts. It counts that you get your ballot. It counts that you return it in time. We are making sure that all of our 46 country committees around the world, as well as all of our volunteers, are mobilized and ready to support the voters abroad when it comes time to return their ballot. Because, each state has its own rules and each country has its own challenges in terms of returning ballots. And we voters abroad cannot wait till the last minute, the day before the election, to return our ballots. So we are having a huge mobilization to make sure that Americans abroad vote in the numbers that we saw in 2020, where we were providing the margin of victory for the president, 18,000 votes in Georgia, where he won by 12,000 votes. We provided the margin of victory at Arizona. That is what we're here for, and we must expand that. So I'm very grateful for all of you today. The issue of climate is so important, and it impacts our future. Again, it's an existential issue. Thank you so much to the organizers, to the Youth Caucus, as well as to our ECCC for all of your work and for this event. And I will hand back to our hosts for the event.
Miguel?
Why, thank you, Martha. So I'm so honored to introduce Annika Krovi today and ask her to share a little bit more about herself and what brought her to climate activism. Annika is a senior in high school in South Carolina and the national chair of the High School Democrats of America. As the youngest ever DNC member, Annika is committed to applying her more than 4 years of organizing experience towards mobilizing young voters for democratic values and candidates. She will be attending Harvard University starting in August. So, woo, go Harvard, I guess, to study government and global health and health policy. Outside of politics, she also enjoys reading, listening to podcasts, and playing soccer, which in Europe we know as football. So go ahead, Annika. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey folks, and thank you for that lovely introduction and the invitation to join you and join all of our Democrats abroad here today. As Miguel said, I'm Annika. I represent over 10,000 high school students who are putting in the work to elect Democrats up and down the ballot this cycle and every single year. And to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got pulled into this work, I'm 17 years old. And so I have, along with most of Gen Z, been raised in a world where far too many threats have been normalized to us, right? We have grown accustomed to hiding from school shooters or losing access to life-saving healthcare or being attacked simply for who we are and who we love. But probably one of the most fundamental threats we have faced is the inaction on the climate crisis from lawmakers. And so I was asked to share a little bit about what brought me to climate activism within the overall sphere of youth organizing. And truly, it's the lived experiences that I have gone through, as well as so many of my peers in high school and in this space. It's my friends in the low country of South Carolina who are seeing their coastal communities erode every single day. It's friends whose homes and communities are burning up, or friends who are suffering from more intense natural disasters than ever before. It is people with worsened air quality and suffering from food insecurity because of the climate crisis. It's our friends abroad who are suffering from all of that and so much more. So truly, to me, climate activism is a necessary and integral part of being a Democrat, especially a young Democrat, because it is the future that we are fighting for. And every day I am just truly so inspired by the folks that are on this call, on this panel, and so many other people who are fighting for greater accountability and just emphasis on the climate crisis across the country and across the world, because it's going to take every single one of us to do it. So I'm grateful to be here, grateful to be speaking with all of you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, Annika, I feel inspired just hearing your words and your voice. We are honored to have you. And I know that you're going to do much for the cause and for young people across America. But now I'm going to introduce Ron. I am delighted to introduce Ron Meehan today and ask him to share a little more about himself and what brought him to climate activism. Ron has a very impressive resume. He currently serves as the Western Regional Advisor for the DNC Environment and Climate Crisis Council. He is the Finance Chair of the Alaska Democratic Party, the Vice Chair of the Alaska Democratic Party Climate Caucus, and the Vice Chair of Communications for Young Democrats of America Environmental Caucus. Really amazing. He is also the Director of Government Affairs for the Food Bank of Alaska, where he coordinates advocacy efforts for more than 180 food banks and food pantries, tribal organizations, faith-based groups, health and senior centers, among others across Alaska. Wow. Ron earned a BA from Wesleyan University in Government and Environmental Studies and holds a certificate in nonprofit management from the Foraker Group. He is particularly passionate about food security, environmental advocacy, and community building, as we can see from the amazing activities you're engaged in. Thank you, Ron. Do you want to tell us a little more about yourself and what has brought you to this space?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And hello, everybody. I first just want to thank Dana, Martha, and Democrats Abroad for giving me this opportunity to speak alongside two outstanding young people from different parts of the country, and then Democrats Abroad as well. It's really an honor to be here with all of you. Uh, Food security, as we know, is directly connected and interrelated to our climate. This is something that I've really been focused on, both in my professional and my personal lives. Alaskans really rely on our abundance of resources. Our mariculture and fisheries are an expanding industry. Things like shellfish, oysters, clams, and seaweed farming are increasingly popular, particularly in South Central and Southeast Alaska. But unfortunately, they are also industries that are enormously impacted by climate change and vulnerable to climate change. As you mentioned, I'm the Western Regional Advisor for the DNC Environmental and Climate Crisis Council, where I'm able to work with state Democratic parties across the Western region to elevate climate policy and opportunities and to support climate champion candidates. I serve as the finance chair of the Alaska Democratic Party, where we raise money and resources that allow us to invest in our candidates and our communities. And we know that our climate it impacts every aspect of our lives, everything from the air that we breathe to the food that we eat. And ultimately, if we damage our environment, we damage ourselves. So a piece of my background, when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time with my uncle during the summer fishing on the Kenai River. It's famous for its world-class salmon run, and if you ever get a chance, would strongly recommend. All of you are welcome to visit. It's unlike anywhere else in the world, and it's really a special relationship that we have with the environment. There are parts of our state, unfortunately now, though, that we have salmon dying in the streams because the water is too hot. And this is of enormous importance in part because on a much larger scale, 2/3 of all wild seafood in the United States comes from Alaskan waters. It has enormous implications on the entire ecosystem. Something we always like to say and we always have to emphasize is that Alaska puts the United States on the map as an Arctic nation. We're on the front lines of climate change. We're warming twice as fast as the rest of the country. And we're seeing this materialize with thawing permafrost, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and massive wildfires. 1/3 of our Arctic ice is gone, and villages are falling into the ocean. And in fact, by 2030, it's projected that the Arctic will be ice-free during the summer. We have communities in Southeast Alaska, like Haines, that have been plagued by devastating landslides. So it is terrifying. At the same time, it also offers some really incredible opportunities, opportunities for us to advance as a state and as a country. Our state has shown that it's what's possible when we invest and put our minds to it. Kodiak, Alaska is one I always have to point to. It's gotten nearly 100% of its electricity from renewable energy since 2014, using a combination of wind and hydropower. This is particularly impressive and notable, given that Kodiak has enormous energy users, including fish producers, along the waterfront, the nation's largest Coast Guard base, and a rocket launch facility. I'll say, we know that young people make the difference in every election, and climate and environment is a winning issue, and one that young people across the country are watching very closely because they'll have to live with the consequences of our actions or inactions. It's partly for that reason that environmental Democrats win. So I want to thank you again for giving me this opportunity. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Ron. Where in Alaska do you reside? Which part of Alaska?
So I'm based in Anchorage, originally from the Kenai Peninsula, and what's particularly exciting about my position is that it very much is statewide, and I'm able to travel often. This weekend,
You're at the same latitude as I am in Finland. I also reside in and we have many of the same issues that you're facing as well. I'd like to turn it over to Mohammed now to introduce Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Dana and Ron. That was really interesting. I am delighted to introduce Paul Presendieu. Paul is an environmentalist in New Rochelle, New York, and is a son of Colombian and Haitian immigrants. The director of community engagement for Soulful Synergy, a millennial minority-owned sustainability social enterprise focused on creating green-collar workers in environmental justice communities. Paul is the current National Environmental Caucus Chair for the Young Democrats of America and the Environmental Caucus Chair Emeritus for the College Democrats of America. Also, Paul is in his second term as the United Nations Foundation's Global Ambassador for the 13th Sustainable Development Goal, climate change, and is the Environmental Advisory Committee Chair for the City of New Rochelle's municipal government. Ron, can you tell us more about yourself and what brought you to climate activism?
Yeah, first, I do want to take a moment to thank Democrats Abroad, not only for this forum, but the incredible work that you do. We are entering into the most important election in the history of our nation in regards to climate civics, and the work that you're doing, making sure that we're getting out the vote, especially in the key swing states for our presidential election, really is invaluable to make sure that we have a competent government and a government that's willing to support the proactive leadership that our global community is looking from the United States of America in terms of addressing climate change. I've been in this climate space my entire life. My father had me at a very young age, helping him with a lot of yard work in the backyard. He was the old school gardener where we had to pull out the weeds, not just sprinkle vinegar all over the weed in our landscape. And also, I was fortunate to have opportunities growing up in New Rochelle, New York, to be part of my local Boy Scouts of America chapter, Troop 11, which really did connect me with a lot of great practices in stewardship, nature preservations, creation of nature trails, and green spaces. And it really did kind of provide me with the mindset of knowing that no matter what environmental profession that what professional professions that we have, or career aspirations, we can all make time to be able to be stewards in our own local community. And I am very fortunate to be part of the Young Democrats of America leadership as the Environmental Caucus Chair, not only to help with organizational programming for Democrats 36 and under throughout the United States of America, but also to be able to provide a platform for very intersectional dialogues that are needed in our space and our communities. I call our team the young environmentalists that are Avengers and Team USA for the environment, because when we look at the other political parties that, whether it's young Republicans or young libertarians or even the young Green Party members, there is not an environmental forum there. So we really had to make sure that us as Democrats are really stepping into this apolitical dimension of climate leadership to let people know that we here, we exist, and we are the young leaders that are really taking a stand to be the leaders for Mother Earth. On top of my work, with the Young Democrats of America, it really is an honor and a privilege to serve on the executive committee of the Democratic National Committee's Council of the Environment and Climate Crisis as the Director of Youth Engagement. I have a motto that I tell people, that I do my best to serve as the Robin for the Batwoman that is the Honorable Chairwoman Michelle Dietrich, and the amazing work that she's doing all over the country, especially with supporting our state parties with the creation of environmental caucuses, so that we could not only localize climate policy, but also be able to train Democrats and candidates that are running on the Democratic Party line of knowing what it means to run our climate. Us and the Young Democrats of America, we've been doing a lot of incredible work supporting intersectional dialogues during Black History Month, Women's History Month, Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and also making sure that we provide a resource hub for all of our members to share with their local chapters. We created a national grants database, so providing funding opportunities that are available from the EPA, Department of Transportation, and also different agencies, and such as FEMA, that are available. And we also created a national resource guide on environmental programming that could be done through the calendar month of Earth Month or throughout the calendar year, because as we all know, every day is Earth Day, and it's really important that we make sure that we do everything that we can to really protect our communities hands-on and really being intentional with the leadership that we want to provide locally in our communities. This environmental space for me is very personal for me. It's something that I definitely want to make sure that I want to be on the right side of history of helping address, not only because of my personal passion of being an environmentalist, but because of my awareness of knowing how important a safe environment is for other career pathways and other individuals. When we're talking about our water security, air quality, also being able to make sure that we're providing equitable infrastructure and climate resilience for our communities. These are things that I consider to be on a level bigger than politics. However, I'm very fortunate and blessed to really be part of and affiliated with the Democratic Party, which is providing a platform not only for myself, but other young leaders to be able to be climate champions and support these dialogues in a political space. So thank you, Democrats Abroad, for this incredible program. And I look forward to being able to provide a meaningful dialogue alongside my fellow panelists.
Well, your words are just music to my ears, Paul, really. Thank you so much, and all of the speakers for joining us. Now we're going to move into our a round of questions. And I wanted to let you know that each question will be different for each one of our honored guests, but we absolutely welcome if you want to chime in. If I ask a question to Paul and Annika or Ron want to chime in with a different perspective, please feel free to. These are questions that anybody could be answering, but I'm going to start first, though, with a question for Paul. How can we ensure that a just transition is possible so that the vulnerable and frontline communities are not shortchanged as we begin our energy transition, as we start to try to address the, efforts to mitigate climate change and to adapt to climate change, all the money that's being poured into it? Do you have any insights into that?
Oh, wow. That's really an important question, especially when it means to engaging our environmental justice communities. I usually, realize that, and sometimes I do this myself, as an environmentalist, we kind of get lost in the sauce of speaking to our own people, the people that are ready to convert it, the people that already get it, as opposed to really being on the front lines of expanding our environmental circles of conversation. And when we're doing this, it's really important that we have conversations and really become the environmental educators within our most marginalized communities that do not have local subject matter experts or local people with insight that can help them create the needed private-public partnerships. So, when it comes to really making sure that we have this equity component in our climate programming and overall environmental mitigation programming, it's important that we have this paradigm shift of engaging our most vulnerable populations, our populations that are on the front lines of issues, and honestly, the populations that historically and systematically have been marginalized to be in the positions where they do not have the economic bandwidth to be able to address their own issues. Some of these issues are a result of redlining, and some of these issues are just a result of just historical underinvestment within communities that don't have the economic bandwidth to hire a full-time environmental engineer or sustainability director, and pretty much the entire burden of municipal leadership is upon the shoulders of a handful of volunteers in a living room that are looking at potential programming that could be done. So when it comes to what we as Democrats should be doing to make sure that environmental authenticity is being placed within our most marginalized environmental justice communities, I would say it's about us looking at a bottom-up approach of how we're creating these authentic private-public partnerships, how we're looking at community-based organizations, how we're looking at such as neighborhood associations, tenant boards, condo boards that could serve as forums to help get resources out to residents through a lens of education, as well as looking at what is the local ecosystems that exist, what are the nonprofits that are there, what are the policymakers, in other words, the city council members member, a village trustee, or someone that could provide letters of support to help secure funding opportunities that could be disseminated to a lot of environmental organizations. I'm really happy of the administration that we have under President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and our EPA Administrator Michael Regan for the incredible work that they've been doing, streamlining Inflation Reduction Act funding and bipartisan infrastructure law funding, intentionally giving it to communities that have been identified as disadvantaged communities through our federal government's climate and economic justice screening tool that's available online. So that, for example, we are now, the federal government is now looking at solicitations for the Community Change Grant, where they made available $2 billion for communities to be able to provide innovative programming. And that is an incredible opportunity that you, as a resident in a community that does not have a tree fund or an environmental advisory board or any resources or economic support to be able to look at flood mitigation strategy or look at an urban heat island study. To be able to have an opportunity to apply for up to $20 million for a proposal really would be revolutionary for a lot of the municipal governments that are putting together shoestring budgets to be able to, have an annual operating plan. Most importantly, I am a big proponent of economic justice in terms of our climate space, making sure that it is a sincere, authentic effort of providing workforce development opportunities for us to create the green collar workers within the communities that are most marginalized. A lot of communities that became environmental justice communities, unfortunately now have a lack of economic opportunities, a lack of job offers, and honestly, a lack of hope for the mindsets of people that are in the communities to be able to secure economic stability and be able to live in the communities, thrive, and become, homeowners. And to be able to provide, workforce development training opportunities to be able to help residents become plumbers, electricians, heat pump installers, facilities managers, or even overall energy auditors or green construction practitioners for municipal development contracts will create the overall needed circular economy that we need for our communities so that we're able to provide funding opportunities to local restaurant owners, to barber shops, because I'm looking at myself, I think I might need a haircut soon, and overall just the local businesses that might need these economic opportunities. So, it's when we're looking at how to make sure that we are authentic for our environmental justice communities, our most authentic communities, it's really about our ability to look at our communities not as a monolith, but looking at them as a confederation of local communities, and really making sure that we are intentional empowering those local communities to be part of the solutions through social economic resources and opportunities.
Yeah, I know it's taking a bit of time for all the money and resources from the IRA to roll out, but it is fantastic with this Justice 40 that, as they have proclaimed, that 40% of the benefits from all of these energy transition investments should go to the marginalized communities and the vulnerable communities. But, how to do that, how to get people, to know that these resources are available, that's another question. But you have given such a very articulate explanation of just the broad range of challenges and opportunities that are involved there. Thank you so much for that answer, Paul. I think we're going to let Mohammed pose the next question to Annika. If you're ready,
Yeah. First, let me warn, if you hear some things in the background, it's been raining heavily here in Nairobi with floods. It's just been terrible, which makes this issue just as important because it affects people's life. Annika, in 2023, a district court in Montana ruled in the favor of 16 youth plaintiffs in the landmark climate lawsuit Health v. Montana. They successfully argued that lawmakers have been consciously prioritizing the development of fossil fuel over the well-being of Montana's residents and the protection of natural resources. My question to you is, what do you think of lawsuits brought by youth against the government or governments for endangering the environment?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Mohammed. I think it's so important. And as I was following along with these cases, first of all, I was, just incredibly inspired by the folks who brought them up. But I think obviously these lawsuits are important, right? Because primarily they are helping young people call attention to the stakes of this issue. And I think when we talk about the climate crisis, it's easy for folks, especially older generations, to maybe dismiss it as an issue for another day. But young communities, minority communities, those who are on the front lines of this battle, like Paul mentioned, they are struggling every day right now, like at this moment, from the effects of climate change. And I think that these lawsuits help emphasize that. So when we see those folks in Montana, or I think a similar case in California, or anywhere else calling out climate related injuries, or just the fundamental right that we have to a healthy environment, a basic right that we should all be guaranteed. I think that is a small stride, but an important stride for greater accountability towards corporations, local governments, whoever, who are sacrificing our climate for personal gain or profit. I don't think that these lawsuits are sort of an end all be all solution, right? I think we need to see tangible, dramatic climate action through policy, things that are going to systemically invest in addressing the climate crisis in a thorough way, things like the IRA and hopefully further actions. But I do think that these lawsuits are a great tool for raising awareness, because it shows folks that the climate crisis is not an issue for another day. It's something that we are seeing the effects of right now. And it is something that folks should be held accountable to, because it is truly a situation where it's life or death. And so I really commend those groups and those young people who are leading the charge with raising awareness through these lawsuits.
Yeah, they've been going on some time. I know Juliana versus the United States has been going on for since 2012. It's a long battle through different administrations, but I agree with you that they can't happen alone, that it has to be through government policy and through actions taken by, also the Democratic Party have been remarkable over the last 3 years in the Biden administration. I think Miguel is going to ask Ron the next question.
Yes, actually, I have a question for Ron. Hi, Ron. What's up? Long time no see. So my question is as follows. Besides the approval of the Willow Project in Alaska, which angered many climate activists, what other advancements in environmental protections have happened in Alaska during the Biden administration? What challenges are Democratic colleagues currently prioritizing?
Hey, Miguel, great to see you, and thank you for that question. I'm really actually glad that you asked that, because we have a lot of very positive environmental protections to celebrate over these last 4 years. The first thing I want to highlight is restoring protections for the Tongass rainforest, which the Trump administration has rolled back. We don't talk about this enough, but the Tongass is the largest intact temperate rainforest left on Earth. It spans nearly 17 million acres. It's an area larger than the state of West Virginia, and it stores 44% of all carbon dioxide contained in national forests in the entire country. It's home to 800-year-old cedar, hemlock, and Sitka spruce trees that provide habitats to more than 400 species of land and marine wildlife. And so I will just say the cultural and ecological value of that region and of that forest to that region cannot be overstated. And I'm fortunate actually next week to be going down to Sitka and Ketchikan and visiting with those communities that the Tongass intersects with. But the Biden administration's actions on the Tongass really reflect the voices of tribal nations and the people of Southeast Alaska, and also recognizes that there's enormous importance in fishing and tourism to the region's economy that development would ultimately endanger. The Biden administration has also put restrictions on oil and gas leasing in 13 million acres in the Western Arctic across Alaska's North Slope and in the Arctic Ocean to really honor the culture, the history, and the enduring wisdom of Alaska natives who have lived and stewarded on those lands for time immemorial. Our majestic and pristine landscapes and waters are really among the most remarkable and healthy in the world, and they sustain a vibrant subsistence economy for Alaska Native communities. And really, I think for most Alaskans, and living in such a unique and incredible place, there's also an understanding that we have a real responsibility to protect it. For future generations and for the many ecosystems that uniquely live here. Joe Biden's administration also rejected the Ambler Road project. That was in the Northwest Arctic, and it would significantly and irrevocably impact resources across the region. It was a monumental achievement for Indigenous rights, for environmental protection, and for environmental justice. And ultimately, these really demonstrate a genuine commitment to protecting our precious ecosystems that match our state's vastness and ecological value. I'd be remiss, of course, if I didn't bring up the Inflation Reduction Act, which has been the most comprehensive climate legislation in the United States in history. It's invested billions of dollars in clean energy, electric vehicles, environmental justice, and it really stands to grow the economy, diversify the economy, and create jobs. I would say, on climate issues, we've made really remarkable and incredible progress. There's also been a significant look at offshore wind projects in expediting reviews of those, in investing money, and also ultimately prioritizing funding for clean energy, which stands to bring the cost of energy down.
Now that you mentioned what's the forest you mentioned? What's the name of the forest you mentioned?
The Tongass National Rainforest. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned it's the size of West Virginia. I live in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is about the size of West Virginia. So just imagine a forest the size of the country I'm living in right now. So that's a huge forest we're talking about. So it's a good thing we're trying to protect the rainforest. Okay.
It is incredibly unique and a remarkable place. If you ever get the chance, please go. It's just under 17 million acres.
Amazing.
So.
Amazing. And I think that there was a new ordinance that President Biden has extended a no drilling ban on huge swaths of areas. Is it over the Tongass or is it another area of Alaska?
No, so the Tongass, what they've looked at there is more mining and timber. Where you're referring to is the Northwest Arctic, okay, which is equally vital in different ways.
So now I'm going to go to a second round of questions, and we're kind of going to stop spotlighting and make it a free-for-all, though I am going to direct questions, but I hope that we can engage in a dialogue with each other as we begin into these questions. But I'll ask Annika first. If you, I just, as the youngest, I wanted to ask Annika, because you're 17, you're the youngest panelist here, and I think you probably have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the younger community. I know that there's a lot of despair, there's a lot of anxiety these days within the Gen Z, the younger generation. I think there are several reasons for that, one of which is really climate anxiety. And I'm wondering, how do you feel personally hope or despair, and in terms of our chances of averting planetary catastrophe? And what do you intuit from other members of the youth community around you?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question. I think it's so important. And I'm not really one to sugarcoat either. So I'll say like it definitely is a mixed bag here, right? Like I can't speak for every young person across the world or even the country. Um, and I think it is easy for us to slip into despair. I think climate anxiety is a huge issue. It is a real issue, and it stems from the fact that it feels like there is a time bomb ticking for so many members of our generation where we just have so much uncertainty about if we will have a future, if we don't take more significant action on the climate crisis, right? It is a serious and existential threat. But obviously, with that all in mind, I think that young people, Gen Z students, we are a pretty hopeful generation. Despite all of the storm and fire that is thrown at us, and I'd say that quite literally in this case, young people continue to organize, they continue to show up, they continue to vote and advocate for what they believe in, what we believe in. And I also think part of it has been just the fact that we have seen progress being made under Democratic leadership, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act or drilling bans or the creation of the American Climate Corps that is creating those green collar jobs Paul talked about. All of these wins are helping give us the hope that we can continue to push forward. But obviously, we know that those continued gains can't be made unless we reelect the current administration and we elect folks into power who do understand the threat of the climate crisis. And so we know that that's why this election is so significant, not only at the presidential level, but all the way down the ballot, electing folks who recognize the importance of environmental justice. And so I'll say it's a long road ahead. I think most of the folks that I speak to within high school Democrats and just in the youth organizing space, we know that it's going to be a tough fight. We know that there's going to be losses, but there's also going to be significant wins if we continue to push for them. And so, I wouldn't be here on this call if I didn't have hope. I know Ron and Paul wouldn't either. And Dems Abroad wouldn't have taken the time to organize it if we didn't know that there is a possibility that we have to fight for a better future and a safer and healthier planet, which is what we all deserve. So there is
Are you
hope.
going to be 18 by the time by November?
Yes.
So it'll be your
November will
first
be
time
my
voting.
first time voting, and I will be extremely excited to vote for leaders who are going to protect our environment among so many other fundamental rights.
And do you feel that your cohort, that your friends your age, are they feeling despair and like they don't want to get out and vote, or do you feel like people are seizing that opportunity?
Yeah, like I said, it's a mixed bag. I think apathy towards this election is definitely incredibly high. A lot of folks don't want to get involved just because they feel like we haven't seen the progress that we have been promised in a lot of ways. And that's why I think within high school Dems and other groups that I'm a part of, what we're doing is we're just reminding folks that, hey, like the Biden-Harris administration has been showing up for us. We know it's not on the news every day. We know that we don't talk about it all the time, but there have been so many wins by Democratic leaders in the climate organizing space and many other areas. And the only way that we can continue to push for progress is if we vote for people who care enough to listen and react and engage with our community. And that's Biden-Harris for us. So hopefully, with all of the work that we're putting in, we're going to see that reflected in November. But I think we're trending towards hope, which is a good thing to be.
Do any of you have something to add to that?
Well, this reminds me when I was 17. When I was 17, I was still a junior in high school. And I was so this close of voting. It was a 2012 election, so I could not vote. So I waited about a year so I could join Democrats Abroad. I joined Democrats Abroad on my 18th birthday. So Annika reminds me of what I went through 10 years ago. And she keeps me hopeful, and I think she is a source for hope for most people here. So, thank you, Annika. I have a question for our panelists. Ron, you're from Alaska, and guess who lives in Alaska? Santa Claus, believe it or not. There is a place called
Finland.
What?
Finland.
Well, we'll see. But Santa Claus lives in Alaska, and what a better person to ask for a gift than Santa Claus himself. So here's my question for you. if you had to ask one thing to see the Biden administration do in a second term, what's on your wish list? Would you like to see the Biden do in a second term? That's the question. Go ahead and tell me what's on your wish list, Ron.
Well, that is a very difficult question to answer in terms of one specific thing. I do know that, I highlighted a lot of progress that's been made. I'm hopeful that we'll continue to build on that long-lasting progress on climate. One thing I'll highlight, the Biden administration was the first to establish a goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That'll stabilize global temperatures at about still a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise of warming. But I hope to continue to see steps to reach that goal on the timeline that the administration has established, or potentially even go below that goal. We know that when there's ambitious goals, it drives ambitious policy change that's desperately needed. I will say the administration has really had a remarkable physical presence in our state too, that I think is unlike anything that I have seen in the administrations in my lifetime. We've had visits from the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, from Secretary of State Antony Blinken, EPA Administrator Michael Regan, the U.S. Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry, the HUD Secretary, Marcia Fudge. So I'm hopeful that in the second administration, we're able to welcome the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, in particular, because, one, I have tremendous respect for her, but two, I think we have more potential for renewable energy development in Alaska than anywhere else, potentially in the world. We want to really continue to invest in renewable energy, particularly in storage and transportation infrastructure. That's something that we really struggle with here in Alaska. But in being able to build that up, it stands to dramatically reduce the cost of energy while also cutting emissions. And that, I think, is a big piece of the message that often is left out, that reducing the cost of energy. Because so many Alaskans, they see the cost of oil and gas continuing to rise, and think that the solution is to basically continue to give massive tax breaks at the state legislative level and the federal level to large oil and gas corporations that ultimately have imperiled the environmental conditions of the world, when we know that investments in renewable energy, again, stand to significantly actually reduce energy costs. That's been seen in many of the countries that have taken ambitious steps towards that, such as Japan and South Korea. I'll say, I won't take too much away from this because I think it'll probably come up soon, but the Civilian Climate Corps is particularly exciting. Something that I'm very, very passionate about and something that I get very excited about is large-scale public work projects that build up our climate resilience infrastructure while also putting people to work. Particularly young people, they have their entire lives then to really explore and develop these new climate resilience jobs. These are good, high-paying union jobs that I think stand to transform our country.
Yeah, really interesting that you talked about renewable energy. Today, the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Raimondo, was here in Nairobi for the business summit, and she talked about how we need to invest in renewable energy. Fun fact, 93% of Kenya's electrical grid comes from renewable energy, and that's something that we can't even I can't imagine happening in the US, right? In in the future, about maybe not in the next few years, but should be a goal, maybe getting to the 100. Since Ron, you kind of stole the second question away from me that I was supposed to ask Paul. Paul, this question for you is: how can the US and the world do more to center young voices in the battle that contain, in the battle to contain climate change? And if you want, and if you want, you can touch on the climate for, I know Ron
Everybody can
touched
talk
on
about all of these
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, I was gonna
Chime in on any of them, all of you.
Mhm.
I was gonna say it's I'm happy that Ron mentioned that because Ron and I we work very closely together. When I'm talking to him at like 2 o'clock in the morning my time, and he's about these conversations about how we could decarbonize the grid, but making sure it's done through a lens that it's labor focused, and also making sure that we really are inspiring the creation of the people that are be co-creators of our green economy. When it comes to civilian climate corps, I think that is the opportunity of the federal government honestly putting the walk behind the talk of a lot of things that are happening in terms of the transformation of our communities. Even though I do a lot of amazing work, as an environmental professional now, my first job at a high school was as a seafood clerk at a local grocery store named ShopRite. If I could go back in time and be able to have access to a federal program that can help me become a green collar professional through vocational trades, and that is aligned with pre-apprenticeship for unionized labor, that is a game changer. And these opportunities being made now is a really, really dynamic opportunity for us to be able to transform the mindset of a lot of young people to know that these career pathways do exist, that they're not these short-term jobs that you get over the summer, but these are legitimate multi-year strategies for you to be able to create a pathway of not only be able to access economic stability in something that makes you feel like you're living a fulfilled life, but being able to tap into these networks of people that are accomplished professionals that can mentor you for the many years to come. As many of you may know, a lot of people are looking to the United States of America for strong climate leadership, because we unfortunately are one of the leading carbon emitters within a global community. So our ability to be able to train our local young leaders to be able to be the individuals that are retrofitting our properties, decarbonizing our supply chains, and making sure that we're reducing our carbon emissions is going to provide a lot of inspiration for the other nations that are part of our global community that do not have the socioeconomic resources that we have in abundance or are growing into abundance through the strong leadership of our President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, and really making sure that we really pin this down with a sense of urgency. The work that's being done, through the civilian climate corps is invaluable because we are fortunate in the United States of America to have a strong network of youth-based organizations, whether if it's youth bureaus for our municipal governments or Boys and Girls Club chapters that throughout the Boys and Girls Clubs throughout the United States of America. Just to plug in the amazing work that Annika is leading with the High School Democrats of America. During her administration, they launched a climate change task force, looking at the intersection between our high schools and the environmental clubs that exist to be able to kind of bridge the divide of environmental advocacy to environmental civics, are great hubs to be able to share these opportunities into. And overall, it's just really a dynamic opportunity to know that this exists now and that you're able to access a website, type in your address, and it pulls up the opportunities that are there for you so that we can have this abundance mindset of accessing these opportunities and not think that we're in a Hunger Games trying to apply for these jobs. So I really think it's a dynamic opportunity for us and unprecedented at the same time. And it's really an incredible opportunity, especially with knowing that these jobs that are being created are in alignment with unionized labor.
Also critically important. And I have to point out, of course, in my generation, there was the Peace Corps, and this is a new iteration of it to address this existential crisis that we're facing and to really help arm young people with a new energy economy. But I have to point out that our fair leader, who I know we all know and respect, Michelle Dietrich, started her journey as a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya, where Mohammed is. And that really helped set the course for her life in service. And this is what she is. She spends a life in service to all of us in the country and trying to help us solve these very important questions. I have great hopes for the Climate Corps and that it will prove to be to even surpass the effectiveness of the Peace Corps in the 21st century. We have a lot of questions in the chat, which I'm very happy about. Some very interested and engaged audience here. So I'd like to start with the first question from Jody in Germany. And this is very important, and all of you can answer it, or one of you, or whoever. It's a free for all. How can older people engage younger voters about environmental issues, in general? Speaking from the perspective of young people, can you give us oldies advice on how to engage the younger generation in talking about these?
Sure. I mean, I can touch briefly on it. I'm sure Ron and Paul will give much more articulate answers, but I think as someone who leads an organization that is very diverse, right? Like thousands of students across the country and abroad now too, which we're very excited about. I think what helps me is the fact that we know that environmental work is very intersectional, and that means that there's a place for every single person in that movement. I come at it from a public health lens because that's what the work that I kind of got involved in that made me interested in politics. And we know that the environmental and climate crisis is tied to issues like food insecurity that Ron touched on, or poor air quality, or it's just a plethora of different health related issues that stem from the climate change and the climate crisis. And so I think if you're trying to, work with young people on environmental issues, or just engage them, even if they aren't particularly impassioned about the climate issue itself, there's always an entry point for them to be involved in it, because unfortunately, climate change has kind of tapped into every aspect of our society. But that also means that we can work with a really diverse group of people, especially young people, to address it from a lot of different lenses. And so, that's what the American Climate Corps is doing. That's what, there's importance of environmental education. There's just so many different aspects of it that can be wrapped in. And I think, obviously the young community is not a monolith. So it helps to kind of figure out what aspect of it you can connect with each individual on is.
I would just share like how important it is to just create a space for youth equity and climate conversations. Just being able to place young leaders in rooms where they're in climate dialogues with people that are older than them, and being seen not as like a junior varsity member of the team, but someone that is a colleague in this space, is a very empowering experience for the mindset of our young leaders. In the state of New York, we have a general municipal law that enables environmental advisory bodies to have up to 2 members that are at least 16 years of age. It's New York State General Municipal Law, Article 12F, Section 239X, that allows our municipal governments to really have that space. And it's invaluable for our municipalities that are home to school districts that have an AP environmental science club, environmental science, or an environmental science club, so that we can really be doing our best to kind of identify the Greta Thunbergs in our local communities and place them in a position where they're able to help advise their local mayors or town supervisors on, good, sound climate policy, even though, the young leader might still be on their way of learning, I guess you could say, the technical climate mitigation and environmental engineering strategies, but just knowing the issue, having the passion of knowing what it means to present that in front of an advisory body. That is an incredible experience. But it's really, really critical that we do the best that we can to really empower our generation of young leaders, because as we see the exacerbation of the degradation of our ecological stability, at that same time, we have to channel it into a sense of urgency of empowering that bench of climate leaders that are going to be champions and neighborhood hope warriors, per se, of helping address these issues.
Very important. Mohammed?
Yeah, and this question, it's right. Somebody's asking you, Ron, but anybody can jump in, right? This coming from Peter.
No, you missed one, the one from Anonymous, which is actually a very important question.
Oh, yes.
It really is important.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So this question can be answered by anybody. Where do you stand on with respect to nuclear energy to reduce emission?
Yeah, this is a relatively difficult question to answer. I think nuclear energy has tremendous possibility in terms of the sheer amount of power that it's able to generate. However, it is a double-edged sword because it comes at enormous risk, both in terms of if something were to go wrong. I know, obviously, a lot of us on the top of our minds when we think of nuclear energy, we think of 3 Mile Island, we think of Fukushima more recently, or Chernobyl. But there's also the reality that even when something doesn't go wrong, we have a real I don't want to say it. I mean, you could argue that it's a crisis in terms of nuclear waste and where to put it and where that ends up going. I think it's often an issue where people get very excited about nuclear energy as long as it's not in their backyard. There's this huge kind of NIMBY around it. And this is a global conversation that's happening too. About 2 weeks ago, I was actually incredibly fortunate to welcome ambassadors from both Poland and from Belgium. And this question came up with them as well. And it was fascinating because Belgium is looking at phasing out of nuclear energy because of those incredible risks and pushback from the public, while Poland is actually doubling down and significantly increasing their nuclear energy, in part because of their reliance currently on coal and on oil and gas. So, we know it substantially reduces carbon emissions and pollution. We know that countries. I took a course on environmental politics of East Asia, and it's something that both Korea and China are really doubling down on too. For me, I do lean towards opposition because of that question around both risks if something were to go wrong, and then also ultimately where the radioactive materials are being disposed.
I'd like to chime in from my experience from Finland. And this is a topic which is very close to my heart. Finland is not unique, but it is really advanced in the type of nuclear technology that it utilizes. It's really fourth generation nuclear technology. You should look it up. There are extraordinary measures for storing, which are miles underground. It is extremely safe. And had we not developed that technology, we would have gone into complete economic recession when the war broke out in Ukraine, because when we applied for NATO accession, we were cut off from all gas supplies from Russia. But we weathered the storm well. We've, at the same time, been building a lot of wind turbines, so we've been able to generate enough electricity. And there are some days where we have so much power that I've got an app where I can check how much energy is per minute. And sometimes we're negative. Sometimes we produce so much, and it's safe and it's clean and the storage is safe. The problem is that a lot of the nuclear energy facilities are antiquated. They have become unsafe. They don't have the proper storage. It costs a lot to invest in building new nuclear facilities, but if the money is there, if they have been developed, if they are state of the art, it can be an extraordinary bridge technology till we can really produce enough renewables to meet our zero goals, but while at the same time eliminating all these harmful pollution and emissions that are causing global, greenhouse gases to rise. So here is a plug for pro-nuclear, and I'm so glad you laid out your anti-nuclear stance. I think this is an important conversation to engage in.
Yeah, I want to be careful. I'm not necessarily anti-nuclear. I'm open to it. I just want to make sure that there are enough precautionary measures in place that safe storage is possible. So I'm certainly very open to talking more about it.
Have any of you been to any of the COPs? No.
No. Mm-mm.
Because there are stands and people, there are groups of people that really engage in discussion in this, and a large group, especially from the Nordic countries, of pro-nuclear youth that come to talk to people about this. But
I did want to add in and share that, I agree with both of you too. I kind of do see like the risk of nuclear energy. At the same time, I do kind of see our energy portfolios as different mixtures of sources that are helping green the electrodes in our grids. I know that all of you at Democrats Abroad are in a very lucky situation to see what other countries are doing to be able to provide innovative solutions. I remember personally researching into the great work that was done in the Netherlands, where they were able to use wind energy to completely decarbonize their train system in terms of decarbonized transportation. So that's completely an amazing initiative that hopefully could be implemented domestically within the United States of America as we look at how to decarbonize our transportation systems. And also, just seeing like what are the solutions for different communities. There might be certain communities where hydropower might be a good source, and there might be other communities where it's really, using some GIS technology to find a solar potential for sources of electricity. So I do know there's like there's not a one size fits all solution, like a good, strategy.
geothermal in California.
Do I, huh?
Geothermal, there are some
Geothermal,
states that
yeah.
have great
Geothermal technology,
geothermal
the ground storage
opportunities.
heat pumps. Yeah, so these are all solutions that are out there, and just knowing that a solution that might work in California might not work in South Carolina or in New York or in Alaska, but just making sure that we're intentional with having these forward-thinking dialogues of identifying, what the core mission is, and it's decarbonizing our grid, and then making sure that we don't just set up camp there, but making sure that we're continuing to innovate and making sure that we're providing the best solutions. And I'm happy that we're able to have these conversations as Democrats to do this. That's the most important thing.
In Finland, we're able to build these facilities. We have very stable terrain, no earthquakes like you might have and a lot of granite where you can go down and really safely store, miles underground, the waste. And we have extraordinary water resources. There are 500,000 lakes. Finland is like forests, granite, and waters, and then a few little people running around in the south. That's about it. I think, Miguel, did you have something to say on this topic? Yeah.
Yes. Well, first off, you mentioned that Finland has 1 million lakes, so I guess Finland is the Minnesota of Europe, I guess. But okay.
Which is why a lot of Finns immigrated to Minnesota. Yeah.
And a lot of Swedes too. Swedes, Norwegians, it's a very Nordic place. I just wanted to let everybody know that I live in Costa Rica, and next month we will be having a meeting here, the Democrats Abroad annual general meeting here in Costa Rica. And all of you three are invited to come to Costa Rica, where 99% of our energy is produced by renewable resources. Half of our electric grid comes from hydroelectric dams. We also use geothermal. We have a lot of windmills. It's a very environmental. It's a very green country, and I hope you can all in the future. It doesn't have to be next month, but you're welcome to come to join us and just see with your own eyes what a country that is sustainable looks like. So that's my
And to chime in on that, the first Earthshot Prize, Costa Rica was awarded the most sustainable country in the world. And of course, the inimitable Christiana Figueres, the architect of the Paris Climate Accords, of course, is from Costa Rica. Costa Rica is really the example that's shining before us all.
So I think we have a question from Peter. Do you want to read it, Mohammed?
Or Miguel, you can go ahead and read it.
Okay, I'll read it. Peter Butterfield from Switzerland asks, do you look to governments to truly lead in solving the many environmental/climate crisis, or is it more up to people and grassroots associations worldwide? That's a question from Peter in Switzerland. Anyone? Anyone?
I can start that. I mean, and I think I read that question in the Q&A as well. And I do think we have a responsibility to lead and show the rest of the world what's possible. As Paul said, the rest of the world does look to the United States to show the path. That certainly resonated with my conversation with several of the ambassadors that came to visit in Alaska. To answer that question, I think we need to take a holistic approach. I think it needs to be private business, it needs to be nonprofits, it needs to be tribal organizations, and it needs to be governments all coming together. This is an existential crisis on a scale unlike really anything that we have ever dealt with before. But we're also seeing tremendous progress on it. I took a course in college on the environmental politics of East Asia, and we know countries like Taiwan, Japan, and even China have really made remarkable progress. And I think a piece of it for them is that they're able to frame it really emphasizing the economic impacts of investing in renewables and bringing the cost of energy down. We have so many amazing nonprofits and climate leading organizations in the United States, from Climate Power and Sunrise to Earth Justice, the Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club. So I think really for me, it's certainly government plays a big role, but it's not just government. It's private businesses looking at that economic side, and then also bringing those nonprofits and environmental organizations and tribal organizations to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I completely. Oh, sorry, Dana.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I completely agree with what Ron is saying here, and I also think part of it is that it is very much a partnership. It is these like environmental justice advocacy groups that are leading the charge in a lot of ways. But then it's also up to governments from the national to the local level to bring these groups in, take them as advisors, and implement the solutions they're pushing for, be innovative about it. I think, like Paul mentioned, I think in his city, they have an environmental advisory group. I serve on the youth commission of my city, and we advise our mayor and council on a variety of issues, but one of our most important focuses this past year has been sustainability and sustainable growth in terms of environmental justice. And so I think that stemmed from an environmental organization that we were a part of, but it's hand in hand with the work that the city government is doing. And we see the same thing mirrored at the state level, at the national level, and obviously, at the international level too. So it is both. It does not have to be or. It is not us versus them in any way. And I think that it kind of takes everyone, like Ron said.
Yeah, to add on that, I think also when you're looking at solving, right, climate change, you have to look at environmental justice. A lot of the countries being affected by climate change, usually very harshly, are countries that emit very little to no, right, carbon emissions. We had Pakistan a few years ago with a third of the country underwater. So I think coming together, yes, from local to national, but also multinational. So in those international organizations, right? COP is a really good one. They meet every year, right? There's UNEP. There's recently formed the Africa Climate Summit. Coming together in this international, multinational organizations, bringing in private, bringing in non-profit, bringing in advisors and climate experts, because whether you like it or not, we are on one earth, right? And even if you try to fix it on your side only, just because you're fixing it doesn't solve climate change. You have to think about it globally. How can we together fix climate change?
That is so true. Think globally, act locally, which is why I really want Paul to chime in on this because he's been on the grounds really with local grassroots organizations. What do you think?
I think we had to really look at government as not this floating Mount Olympus that's in the sky, and really be know that it's an elected representative body of the issues of residents. I'm a practitioner of climate civics. That's what I like to call it. When we elect people, we're not just supposed to stick our heads in the sand until the next election cycle comes around, but actually help co-lead the change that we want to see that's happening in our communities. For some people, it could be, serving on an advisory committee or a commission, or honestly, it could be just signing up for a public comment section and sharing some, issues or some solutions that other communities are doing, so that we're able to pretty much expedite the reverse engineering of the best practices that are proven to be successful, that we see. Being an environmental leader and helping support your government, it could be, creating a renewable energy grid through solar, or installing a solar wind turbine. But it also could be helping address an area where a sidewalk is missing, where people are walking against traffic, or an area where, there is no recycling bin, or garbage units, that's resulting in areas that are being polluted on potential green space. So I definitely do strongly encourage the civic participation of people. When you're in government, especially for the people I've engaged with, they're dealing with a wide spectrum of issues. Whether if it's a migration issues from the things that are happening, or if it's issues dealing with economic bandwidth from underfunded school districts. But any way that anyone that has done the research, could it be able to assume a position of leadership in environmental education to our leaders in government, I think it'll be invaluable for us just to be able to create those partnerships, because people in government are going to be able to help support that through a legislative agenda, and your ability to kind of place them in a better, stronger position to make the right decisions when they come up, or be able to, support them with even crafting some of the policy during work sessions, or things that residents are able to join, is invaluable. And also, being able to support the electoral process too. Us as environmentalists have to make sure that we're supporting the climate candidates so they can hit the ground running when it comes to these tough decisions in climate policy and what needs to be done. And it's not really just about people that are in the elected government on a city council or on a town board, but the people that are on your planning board are just as important, with zoning regulations as well too, than the people that are sitting at the dais at a city council meeting. So we really have to make sure that we're looking at the system of government as a representative body that we are part of as residents, and doing the best that we can as environmental leaders to be able to help educate our elected leaders to be part of the process, or will mobilize as campaign organizers to get them out.
I feel so uplifted and inspired listening to all of you. I've learned so much. There's one more question I want to ask. I think we only have time for one more question. And it has to do with you all personally. And that Megan Kennedy Chuan asks, how do you all take care of yourselves and avoid burning out in the face of this climate crisis and the despair that the world, but especially young people, are facing right now in the world? I want all of you all to answer.
Let me start there.
Okay, you
I
start,
think, yeah,
Mohammed.
I think it's focusing on the small wins, while keeping right on mind that we have a bigger goal. I talked to yesterday this really amazing guy who works in northern Kenya. What he does is he builds mini grids to really local communities that are not reached by the Kenyan grid. And it's really interesting because although the Kenyan government keeps saying, oh, we're going to do it, and they set aside right the money for it, it's not happening. So he came in with funding from philanthropic and nonprofit organizations, and he you don't hear about it on when we're talking about climate change, or whether if it's winning. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, yeah. I got froze there. But whether it's winning a COP battle to building a mini grid, right, so that people who are not in the right grid have renewable energy, so it's powered by solar, and they have electricity in their home. I think focusing on those small wins, learning where to look for it, but also making sure that you're in the back of your mind, this is a large battle. This will not be fixed tomorrow. It will take years, if not decades, to really mitigate the cause and effect of climate change. So focus on the small wins, keep your eyes on the larger goal. I uh, that's how I keep myself from burning out.
Great advice, Mohammed.
I,
How
I
about
was,
you,
oh,
Paul?
Oh, I was gonna share that I time box everything during the day, even times that I eat. I do my best to really make sure I streamline the essential things I need to do when I'm inside of meetings, work sessions, extracurriculars, so I know what my life is. I'm prepared for it, out, and I'm able to make sure that I accomplish my responsibilities. But at the same time, I definitely do make sure that I do my best to unplug and be off the grid. I'm fortunate to live in a city and a county in Westchester County that has a robust park system that allows me to kind of really be in nature. Sometimes I even take some of these meetings in nature through a hotspot, and just being able to just look at a lake and being in just being in nature and hearing some of the natural sounds that are out there. But when it comes to me, when it's time to get work done, I definitely try to make sure that I am preparing my weekly schedules in advance. I know what my responsibilities are, and I'm doing my best to really have that balance of my work life, but also taking time to recharge and appreciate what I, am looking at, what I do protect during my work hours.
And you go to nature and the parks. And by the way, I have to note, Biden declared National Park Week this for the last week of April going forward. So Paul is using those great bounty of resources of American parks in the United States to help recharge your batteries and to keep yourself well organized. I know that's a lesson we can all learn. Annika, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, I can definitely jump in. I'll first say that this is an incredibly thoughtful question because knowing the people on the call, even those who I just met today, I know that you are all incredibly tireless, hard workers who are just very committed to this cause. So it is super important to take those reminders about, self-care and centering yourself for a few moments too. I think part of my answer is kind of what Paul touched on of just being in nature. I have always kind of found a lot of peace outdoors. I would spend time with my grandparents outdoors, in India when I would go visit them. And I think that just being in nature is obviously just a huge place of solace for me. And I think the second aspect, and perhaps the more important one for me, has always been just being in community with other folks who have these same visions and these same passions, because I think when you're with folks who care about the same causes and who understand how important it is, you can be there for each other at times of stress or a burden, but also be there to celebrate the big wins with each other too. And I think within high school Democrats, within, just the party as a whole, and also just my community here in South Carolina, I have found so many people who care about our climate and care about, the future of our country. But that means that, when there's a huge victory, we can all celebrate together. And when there's something that we're not so enthused about, we can be there for each other and be that support system. And so I think part of fighting climate anxiety, part of fighting just kind of the general fear about the future, especially leading up to this election, is being with folks who understand the importance and are still there to comfort you and be there throughout the process, be in community with you.
What a beautiful answer. And it is. Community divides the sorrow, but magnifies the joy and the wins. What a beautiful answer. Miguel, Would you like to
So-
share with us?
So how do I take care of myself and how do I avoid burnout? I go on to Zillow.com and I look for property in Alaska. That's what I do. But no, for real. I do think that what Annika said is very important. Having friends, having a community, speaking to them, speaking of what worries you at night, that is important. And Democrats Abroad has been that community for me for the last 10 years, and I can proudly say Democrats Abroad is a family. And that's with that note, I think we can close.
I would like to hear from Ron also. He will
Oh,
have
sorry.
the closing thoughts. We're a few minutes over, but I really want to hear what Ron works so hard, and I want to hear what he has to say.
Oh my goodness, no pressure. Well, certainly I have a very similar sentiment to so many of you. Frankly, it's conversations like this with so many incredible leaders that gives me tremendous hope and energy to keep going. For me, it's also a matter of really intentionally carving out time for myself where I can disconnect from all this, because there is so many things going on and so many things to be concerned about and to organize around. I'd be remiss as an Alaskan to not say that I don't spend a lot of time out in nature. I frequently, as often as I can, am out hiking, up in the mountains, in the forests, out on a boat somewhere. And really spending as much time out in nature in these areas that we're working so hard to preserve and protect. And it allows me to really, it's a tranquil that is really unique.
Well, have a great gift to have been raised in such an extraordinary piece of nature in Alaska. Will any of you be attending the convention in Chicago?
I'm hoping to.
I will. I hope to meet all of you there. I really hope to meet all of you there. This has been an amazing conversation. I started today not in the best of mood, and I am finishing it uplifted, inspired, educated. I've learned so much from you today, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that you joined us for this discussion. Onward we march. We have a lot of work to do getting the vote out for the 2024 election. As we all know, this is there's a lot at stake, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the week. Get out to a park this week, since it's National Parks Week. We are in the US, and hopefully seeing you soon this summer. So good day for you and good night for Mohammed and I. It's already nighttime here.
And I just wanted to say one more time, thank you so much, Dana, Mohammed, Miguel, Angela, like everyone on the Gems Abroad team who organized this. I think this was lovely. I'm so honored to have been asked to join y'all, and hopefully we can, stay in conversation about all of these issues and so much more.
Definitely. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing you for many years to come. You're going to be important voices in our movement for many, many years to come. Thank you.